Hey everyone, Ryan here, and I've got another painting video for you. In this video, I'm going to be walking you through my process of painting MacReady from the board game Infection at Outpost 31, which is, of course, a board game based off of the science fiction classic from 1982, The Thing. And this is the MacReady piece, which was the character played by Kurt Russell. So this should be a lot of fun. One of the longer painting videos, but hopefully you'll enjoy it. So let's go ahead and jump in. You can see most of the colors that I'll be using laid out right here, and I'll do my best to try to go through and mention exactly what colors it is that I am using along the way, but all of them will be listed in the links below, so don't worry there. You can see I've already gone ahead and based everything white. He started off that real bright yellow. And I've got it based white, and I've gone through... There we go. Here's a better view. You can also see here that after basing it white, I've got this nice bright blue on the base and for the metal, for the flamethrower and the flamethrower tanks here on the back. I do this for a couple of different reasons. I like to use blue as a base for my metals, and I'm going to really enjoy the effect that the blue base is going to have for the snow. But here we are jumping into painting his jacket. Now for this first layer on his jacket, I'm using Death World Forest, and I've thinned this down a pretty good amount with some medium. It just gives me a better control of the color that I'm putting on. I like Citadel's base paints. The pigments are really nice, but I like to use a thinner layer, which means mixing in some of that medium. It means that I'm going to have to use multiple layers, but the sculpt on these figurines have really good detail to them, and I don't want to lose that detail by bulking up with layers and layers of paint straight from the pot. If you've watched my other videos, sometimes I do paint straight out of the pot. I know some folks always do it, some folks never do it, but for me it depends on the miniature. I'm using an ultra fine brush here, just going through and laying in this base layer. Being a little bit careful up around his hat and the face, as well as that cord that's going from the flamethrower to the backs of the tanks there. I'm getting up underneath. There's some really nice detail to the collar of the jacket. I was trying to show you there. Autofocus didn't really like it too much. That's what I'm trying to go through and do, is just lay in all of this. Now we've got a nice gray shirt that's underneath, and plus there's of course his neck and his beard and the hat, and so careful of that. If you get that on there, then just go in and dab it off, or you'll be able to cover it up later. Again, this is just my first layer, so I'm just getting a nice quick base down, being as careful as I can. I've thinned my paints, so we'll need a couple more layers to it eventually. Just a last couple of places going through, and it dries fairly quickly. I don't have a lot of medium. If you use a lot of medium, then your dry times are going to be quite a bit longer, but we've got that, and pretty happy with what I'm looking at. So I want to give this jacket time to dry, and I'm going to go ahead and move into his hat. So with that, I'm going to be using Mornfang Brown as well as Scrag Brown. But my first base coat for this here is the Yokero Orange. And it's going to lead to a really bright hat. And if you find some photos of the costume, it's not that bright. I mean, it almost looks like a straw hat there. Got a light brown leather hat, but we're gonna knock that down eventually. I've cleaned my brush, dried things off, and now I'm going in and laying in that base coat for his hat. Again, I'm being real careful. I don't want to go back over the collar, and I don't want to mess up his forehead or anything like that. So I've gone ahead and picked up my kitty and flesh tone, so I'm going to knock out the face and the hands here. So if my camera will cooperate. And in the background, what I'm doing is I'm pulling the pigment off of the brush. There's not much on there to begin with, but I'm pulling some of that off, and I'm not even using my palette. My palette's a pretty cheap little palette. It's a plastic bag with a with a napkin on the inside so that I can see it. But I'm actually pulling that pigment off right on a sheet of paper so that I have real fine control. And here we are, just laying this color in, this base flesh tone, right into the face. He's got this big, glorious, wonderful beard. So I don't want to mess that up too much. It was actually the first time Kurt Russell had had a beard since filming Escape from New York, I believe. He did that and then went off and did some stage work, but then came back because he wanted to work with John Carpenter and spent an entire year growing out his beard and that big, wonderful 80s hair that he had there. And so we don't want to mess that up by getting paint on it. Laying this into the hands again as well. I'm being careful. I move my figures a lot as I paint. It's one of the reasons why I like this setup with this piece of cork and a little ticky-tacky, and it gives you a lot of play and a lot of movement. Citadel sells some base stands, I guess, if you really want to go with that, but I just use a piece of cork. Here's a little bit closer up. You can see some of that yellow bleeding through from that base, but that's okay. That's not going to be too much of a big deal. And I know that that bright blue of that fuel tank and flamethrower and even of that snow, I know that looks pretty bizarre, but I think it's going to turn out looking pretty nice. I'm trying to find the focus here. Unfortunately, having a little bit of a hard time. But here we have MacReady so far. We got a good base of the jacket, hat, and flesh tone. I've just given this some time to dry, given it a good couple of hours, and I want to go in and start to work on the jeans. So now I'm using Lauren Forest here. They're a little bit darker of a green, and depending on the reference photos that you use, if you want to do this yourself, sometimes things look a little more brown or a little more gray. But from what I've seen, these greens are really the way to go with this. And then we just darken them up. I'm using a bit wider of a brush. It's a sloppier brush, to be honest. It's one of my cheaper brushes. But I'm just getting a quick layer down. And again, I've thinned this out with some medium. But it's not a whole lot. And you'll see I'll work straight from the pot and then over into a little puddle of medium I've got on my palette there. Just getting this Lauren Forest there everywhere. And I'm not being as careful as maybe I should be. I've got it a little bit on his boots, but oh well, we'll fix that later. Here I'm going in with a little bit darker of this Mornfang brown. And this is what I want to use on the beard. So I'm just laying this in nice and easy, getting it where I can. Again, this ultrafine brush, which is basically what I use the entire time for this paint. For the most part, I tend to use pretty small brush heads, and it gives me more control. You might be better You might be better in your brush technique, and so you can use a larger brush. But here we are. We've got this beard laid in there. Now this is a tricky part. He has a mustache, and so I've got to pull this line right across. And focus isn't helping me out here, but you still want to be able to see his mouth there. So that's what that was. Just trying to get you a good shot of that. Oh, now I'm just working on MacReady's glasses there. He's got these wonderfully iconic aviators on. And you know what? I'm just using an Abaddon Black in that. I don't think I showed it. But I'm just pulling that line straight across. Well, that's not a helpful shot, is it? Sorry, folks. But for those glasses, I just pull a straight line across the top and then try to fill in the rest of them. I actually ended up going back and fixing this. I didn't like the angle I got, but it was a pretty easy fix. Now again, with that Abaddon Black, I'm just going in and filling in his boots. He's got black combat boots on. That's one reason why I wasn't super careful with the forest green, the Lauren Forest, because I knew that I was coming in with these. And my flocking's going to cover this up as well. So just knowing that ahead of time, I'm not being maybe as careful as you might want to be. There's some gorgeous texture on this basing. If you can see it, the snow really piles up. And I'm going to use that as a guide for my own flocking work once I'm done. So there we are. We've got just about all of the basic colors laid in here. Now this is just, oh, what is that? Celestra Gray. It's for the little bit of his shirt that's peeking out. I'm going to sneak in there and get that painted. That shirt's going to pop a little bit more once we get some of our washes in there to give ourselves some shadow. That's all that is. Now that cord running from the tank to the flamethrower, the business end of that flamethrower, I'm using an Eshin gray. It's a much darker of a gray, and I'm filling that in. And you know, I have to make a decision here. I have to fill in where some of the cord isn't, but the plastic for the base is. And now I'm finally going in with my chainmail, this metal. So here's where I'm hoping you're going to start to see why I like to use this blue base. A nice bright blue base to build off of with your chainmail, with your metallics. It's going to give a nice cobalt look to this. It's something that makes the metallic paint have a little bit more play and a little bit more depth to it. Now, if you want to try to do these with non-metallic metals, you can certainly do that. I'm not great at them, and so I don't do them as much. But that's what I did there, and that blue bleeds through a little bit, and something that I really like. Now I'm going in again, and I'm just knocking down the brightness of this hat that he's wearing, and with that I'm just using Seraphim Sepia. I'm gonna let that calm itself down a little bit so we're not quite so bright, not quite so orange or yellow. It doesn't need to look like a straw hat. You know, it's a brown leather hat that we want it to end up looking like. That's gonna file into those cracks and crevices. Here I'm going in with a Athonian camo shade, and I'm trying to take a lot of this just right along where the shadow would be. It's on the inside of the legs, on the underside of his butt. That's where I want that shadow to be, because that's where that shade is going to end up. Again, I'm using that same shade on the jacket up top give it a little bit of a more dynamic look. Let it get into those cracks and crevices. I've had quite a few days between a lot of these for things to dry, by the way, just so you're able to tell that. Now I'm going in here with a dry elderflesh in order to hit some of these highlights, both on his face and on his hat and hands. I'm using those. I think that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. And then I'm using the Nurgling Green layer. No, sorry, it's not a Nurgling Green. That is a Underhive Ash. Again, this is a dry. And I'm just trying to put this where some light would hit. So the tops of the shoulders, backs of the calves, top of the thighs. Now I've got a pretty gnarly brush there. It's got a lot of little feathery flyaways. My dry paint. Boy, autofocus isn't doing us any favors. I'm sorry about that, folks. And it's just places for that light to hit. And here's where we're going to add our flocking. So I'm going to build up some of this base. And I use this with just regular old white school glue and some snow flocking. And I'm painting on, and this is a mixture. This is about half and half school glue and water to give this a nice little place for all of that snow to adhere to. This is a new package. I had to end up opening it up. I mean, and the flock lasts forever. This one gets all over the place, so I really suggest working. Now, there's two ways you could do this. You could just set this on top of the lid and then dump everything on top of it. I don't like to do that. I want to sprinkle it on there. I want to give the nice snowfall, see where it hits, and then I pretty aggressively tap things off. Now I'm using this same school glue, but it's a little bit thicker. It's about 75% glue, 25% water. And I've just decided, where do I want the snow to be resting? Well, I think the snow's, creeped up his pants. I think, if we've gone out and played in the snow, it creeps up your pant legs. It's on the top of his hat, the top of his shoulders. It's snowing outside. And that's where that snow is resting. What I'm doing here is I'm using a completely dry brush, and I'm just getting that snow off of his face, off of the places I don't want it. And now I'm using a pure mix, just straight up white glue. And I'm building up the texture of the base a little bit. And there we have it. There is Kurt Russell as MacReady in The Thing, Infectionate Outpost 31. I think it's a pretty great little piece there. I like how the blue shines through a little bit on the metals. I love the flocking in the snow. And now I just have all of the rest of the cast to do. A big thank you to all of the fans and viewers. You are super awesome and the reason why we keep putting out these videos, and so thanks a lot. I want to, of course, say a special thank you to our Patreon patrons. Specifically, thanks to Joan and Arby, Sean, Laney, and Bryce. If you want to get a shout out at the end of our videos, as well as get our videos a day early and some other cool perks, go over to patreon.com/rollforinitiative and check us out there. If you really like this video, let me know. If you love the movie The Thing, let me know. And if you have a favorite character from The Thing that you'd like to see me paint next, let me know. I plan on doing all of them and putting the different videos up, but if you've got a character that you love, let me know, and if I get enough votes for one in particular, that'll be the next one I put up. So, I'm Ryan, this is Roll for Initiative, and I'll see you next time.